I take very seriously the American dream. I think Americans take it for granted. You know,
I think you're right.
it's what's written on the base of the Statue of Liberty. Give us your huddled masses yearning to breathe free. I guess I felt privileged to be a huddled mess at the beginning. And I realized this most amazing country because only your ambition will put limit on what you can achieve.
Our story, the one that defines us, spins a tale of chapters that reveal the origin of our why. Join me in exploring the narratives of changemakers who rise to the moment more often than not, and who are defined not by their achievements, but by the storylines they believe in. Join me, Dr. Rod Berger, as I integrate my new book about storytelling into a conversation that meets the moment. This is The Narrative Edge, a podcast under the banner of Headroom with Dr. Rod Berger, presented by our friends at Rig Productions. And now, onto our show. Well, I am so looking forward to this. Many of you, thank you for following my Headroom podcast. This is a new extension of Headroom that is mirroring my book that is coming out November 12th, The Narrative Edge, Authentic Storytelling That Meets the Moment. And I had been pondering who would I want as a guest for this first episode to help support, obviously, the conversations that I've been weaving into my own book. And I got an email from someone that I value quite highly in the literary world, and that's Kim Weiss over at PR by the Book. You should check them out. I talked to so many authors and those aspiring authors in PR by the Book, and Marika and the team. They are absolutely the best. And when I got the email from Kim about our guest, I said, well, wait a minute, I need to open this up. And I'm so glad that I did. And she buried the lead a little bit. I saw Revenge of the Nerds, a classic movie of the 80s, and some other things. And I thought, okay, I want to dig a little bit deeper. And I'm so glad that I did, because today we're going to be learning about a new book and really a story about a storyteller and the vulnerability, the power of vulnerability in impacting those around us and the generations to follow. So I'm so happy to be welcoming in Peter Samuelson. And Peter, I'm going to do this. I know for those that are watching this, we look a little bit like we're related in our dress and our appearance. So maybe you're my just slightly older brother.
I was going to say you are my slightly older brother.
Oh.
Why? I get to be the older.
I know. That's probably very poor form on my part. I'm going to do what I'm sure will be, you've gone through this many times, but I want people to understand the breadth of your background. So if you don't mind humbling or entertaining me and just letting me read your bio, I think it's important for the audience. And then we're going to talk about Finding Happy, your new book, which is coming out, A User's Guide to Your Life with Lessons from Mine. By the way, I love that title. All right, so Peter is the co-founder and president of First Star, and we're going to talk about the 17 high school academies on college campuses for youth and foster care. He's also the CEO of Filmco Media, which is a commercial film company that uses empathy to improve society. Peter is a serial pro-social entrepreneur. In 1982, he co-founded the Starlight Children's Foundation, which is psychosocial services for seriously ill children. By 1990, the positive impact of Starlight seeded his next pro-social endeavor, Starbright World, the world's first avatar-based social network for seriously ill teenagers, co-founded with Steven Spielberg. Following that in 1999, he saw the formation of First Star. In 2005, the founding of EDAR, the Everyone Deserves a Roof Initiative, single-user mobile homeless shelters. And in 2013, the launch of Aspire, the Academy for Social Purpose and Responsible Entertainment, which is media training for undergraduates not in film schools. In the midst of all of this, Peter has produced 27 films, raised 4 children. He was educated at Cambridge and the Anderson School of Management at UCLA. He's been married for 35 years and continues to fight every day for those less fortunate, chief among them America's abused and neglected children. I'm going to continue, Peter, to let people know into your story, but he was first in his family to attend college. He graduated from Cambridge on a full scholarship with a master's in English literature. After serving as production manager on films such as The Return of the Pink Panther, he immigrated from England to Los Angeles and produced Revenge of the Nerds, Tom and Viv, Willed, Arlington Road, and 23 films. He served on the 3-person founding board of Participant Media, Jeff Skoll's pro-social media company, which produced An Inconvenient Truth, The Help, Spotlight, and Green Book. And then from 2012 to 2013, he was the founding managing director of the Media Institute for Social Change at USC. Peter, I did that because there is so much depth there and substance to what you're doing. And maybe it's because I lived in LA for a number of years, and there are plenty of people that I think have, on the surface, fantastic, but maybe not the substance or the depth or breadth of what you have brought to the table. There's so many places to go, and here's where I want to start. And I'm not giving this away, but sometimes I think when we open a book, we shortchange some of the initial pages that set the tone. And in your dedication page, I just want to read for the readers to just give you a sense of who Peter is. For every young person who shared their secrets and dreams with me, and those who asked for help, I see you. If there's anything, not to minimize anything in the book, but for me, if I had to walk away with one page from your book, that right there says so much to me. Can we start there? I want to start with seeing you, seeing other people, but I want to turn it on your background. You come from, I think, a legacy family in film and production and storytelling. Was there a moment when you first saw yourself and the independence of your own voice, of your own sort of creative lens?
Sure, I think so. The challenge to me, which pivoted my life in a good way, was in 10th grade back in London. My English teacher, Mr. Lund, I'm sure he had a first name, but we were only allowed to call him Mr. Maybe his first name may have been Mr. He said, see me after school, which is never a good thing. And in the end, he said to me, I remember he poked me in the chest, and he said, if you work about twice as hard, you could go to a really good university. And I said, I don't think so, Mr. Lund, thank you so much. But, my dad left school at 14. I don't think there's anyone in my family who's ever been to a university. And he said, well, it'll be even better then because you'll be the first one. That was the pivot. I think the second pivot is that after Cambridge, I looked around and I said, wait a minute, I've got this totally wrong. I ended up studying medieval English literature because Mr. Lund was interested in that, therefore I was. But they don't have jobs for people whose whole knowledge base is medieval English literature. They're not standing in a line outside my door. But I had good French, and I had worked as an interpreter purely by being in the right place at the right time. I got hired to be the unit interpreter on the Steve McQueen film in my gap year after high school and before Cambridge. And I had made a lot of relationships on the American crew of that film. And eventually, after college, I worked on a television commercial with someone I had met on the original Steve McQueen film. And at the end of what we did is we filmed the Monte Carlo rally from Marrakech to Monte Carlo. And at the end of it, he said, you want to come back to LA? You've never been. You don't know what editing is. Why didn't you come back? And I said, well, would I have a job? And he said, yeah, I'll give you a job. And I said, and would I earn enough that I could get somewhere to stay and get a car? And he said, well, to start off, my family, we have a guest room. You can stay with us. And we even have an extra car. So there you go. And that was a man called Tony Bushing. And I became an immigrant into the United States. I got a work permit. Eventually, I got a green card. Eventually, I became a citizen. But I take very seriously the American dream. I think Americans take it for granted.
I think you're right.
It's what's written on the base of the Statue of Liberty. Give us your huddled masses, yearning to breathe free. I guess I felt privileged to be a huddled mess at the beginning. And I realized this most amazing country because only your ambition will put limit on what you can achieve. And these are such wonderful people. And I traveled all around the country and, and I became a film producer and I made a Western, because the only reason I did the Western is I thought, if I do this Western, I'll be a proper American, I'll even get a cowboy hat. So there I was in Alamogordo, New Mexico, and outside of Santa Fe and Albuquerque and all the rest of it. So I take the American dream seriously. I wrote the book, Finding Happy, because one of the 7 nonprofits of which I'm blessedly and privileged to be the founder, they're the work of thousands of people, but I am the founder, is called firststar.org. And First Star I started it because I realized foster kids in America don't go to college. And I knew what college had done for me. And I thought it was ridiculous. Only 6% of the nation's 500,000 kids in foster care go to college. You could argue they need to go to college more than anybody else because they got no, good family to help them. And, they don't have a community and no one's giving them unconditional love. So my thought was, well, what if we housed, educated, and encouraged high school-age foster kids for 4 years on the campus of a big university? And I thought, well, what can possibly happen?
What can go wrong?
What can go wrong? So I took myself off up the road to UCLA and I met with the chancellor, who I think thought I was going to donate. That was why I got the meeting. But I didn't donate. I said to him, will you let me house, educate, and encourage an initial cohort of 30 ninth graders, and we'll have them in the middle of your campus for 4 years, and our goal will be either to get them into college or to something good. It has to be better than the 6% of foster kids who otherwise go to college. So amazingly, I was in there 2 hours, and at the end of it, he said, where's the money going to come from? And I said, one thing I know as a film producer is how to pitch stuff.
Yeah.
And I think if we tell people this is a transformational idea, and I think we'll get the money. And that turned out to be true. So that was, long time ago.
Peter, where did that start? I want to kind of put a pin in that. I don't want to take that for granted that you thought about others that may or may not be approached. You talk about the American dream, and there's a bit of an irony, right? Working in Hollywood, where that's really, I think, the source for so many American-born children, where they see these movies, they see this sort of the branding of America, and maybe that's the sort of the origin of taking it for granted, because they just assume it's going to be there. It's going to be in the commercials. It's going to be on the Wheaties box, the Olympics, Rocky. All of those sorts of things. And yet you come and say, wait a minute, I don't want to take this for granted. What was that about your upbringing that allowed you to expand the aperture to take in that information in a way that meant something to you?
I think the best way to answer it is the way I teach a class in First Star called Random Acts of Kindness and Pay It Forward.
This is part of your empathy curriculum, correct?
It's part of the empathy curriculum. It's very counterintuitive, because you would think, why would a foster kid, who has no money and feels nobody loves them and they're going nowhere fast and their greatest ambition is to get a job in McDonald's and so forth, why would they want to take care of somebody else? Why would they feel empathy? So it's a 2-class little mini course. The first 90 minutes, we talk about the golden rule. I challenge them. I say, you're walking down the sidewalk and there's an old lady in rags lying face down, fast asleep. Do you A, stop and put $1 under her arm, but you don't wake her up? Or B, do you wake her up, give her the $1? Or C, do you just look away and walk past? And it leads to a conversation about the golden rule, which is in 170 world religions. And it's about a sense of social justice, a sense of balance, a sense of looking at an old lady in a damp cardboard box that is her home, and on the side it says Sub-Zero, And I thought, well, I'll be damned. I have the refrigerator and this old lady is living in the bot. What's wrong with this picture? So in the second class, I say to the kids, each of you is going to get $200. And they say, seriously, we're going to get two? And I say, no, you're not going to keep it. You have to write 300 words to whom or to what you would like it to go. Who'd you want to help with your $200? And we get the most amazing little mini essays. So like the one that sticks in my head, my name is Jose. I'm adding $10 of my own because that makes 210. And I need 210 because it takes $70 down at the Humane Society for them not to euthanize a dog. And I'm going to save 3 puppies. And the reason I'm going to do that is last time I was down there, I looked into the eyes of a puppy that had been very badly beaten. And I saw my own eyes because I was very badly beaten as well. So I believe actually that it's not a choice whether we put back into life. I think if we don't, the whole thing collapses. Some people listening, our scientists, our engineers, will know about the second law of thermodynamics. It's really cool. I'm not a scientist, but I felt that this was just a sort of general human truth. The second law of thermodynamics says, in any closed system, and a closed system could be your planet, your family, an internal combustion engine in your car, if you do not pay attention to it, if you do not apply energy to it on a running basis, you have to oil the engine or it will stop turning. You have to nurture your family. You have to take care of your climate and so on and so forth. If you don't do those things, you have a thing called entropy, which is left to its own devices. Any system just devolves to random nothingness, chaos. So I think that is an overarching truth. And what it means is if we care about a damn thing, and I especially care about the next generations, we have to do ripples on the pond. We have to put our shoulder to the wheel, find something, whether it's our own something or somebody else's something, which is going to heal the world a bit or a lot. And I realized as a film producer, I knew how to lead. I knew how to start stuff. And so I did it originally, bringing happiness to seriously ill children. That turned into the Starlight Children Foundation. And then Steven Spielberg and I did Star Bright World, and then First Star, and then EDAR, Everyone Deserves a Roof.org. So that me. But the other thing is, and it's what the book is about, the book is called Finding Happy. It's not called Making the World a Better Place, because I think there's another whole underpinning reason why we should all try and fix the world around us. And that is where you find your own happiness. And I didn't realize that until I started repetitively founding the charities and keeping them alive and building them and drawing other people in and putting the team together and using the money and meeting the kids we're helping and so forth. And I wrote the book because I realized that how we find happiness, and this comes up so much in the mentoring, because I think of my foster kids, and we have about 1,000 of them between the kids that are in our 17 academies and the alumni. And they are the same as any other teenagers or early 20s, young adult, except they got it worse because they're carrying PTSD, they've been abused or they've been neglected, but they are also just teenagers, just young adults. And I know what helped, and I kind of developed pattern recognition. And in my mentoring, I started thinking to myself, isn't it interesting? There's like 25 things that always come up. And sure, there are probably 100 things, but mostly it's the 25 things. And I thought I could actually write this down. I could do a kind of self-help manual for young adults, Gen Z, if you like, and the lower end of millennials. I could actually write it down. I could organize it maybe in chapters, and each chapter would be a subject. And then I thought, I've had adventures, scary, ridiculous, absurd, funny adventures as a film producer. I could use those to illustrate the chapters in the book. So if there's a chapter and they're in, what is a good risk? What is a bad risk? How can you tell the difference? I thought, God, I've got examples where I've got it right and where I've got it wrong. And I could use them to kind of punch it up. So it's turned out rather well. You could have knocked me over with a feather because my book agent took it out. There was like a little bidding war. Simon and Schuster Regalo got it. Then they came back and said, can we have the rest of the world as well? Because they only had North America. So we gave it. And, it'll be what it'll be. It's live on Amazon and Barnes and Noble and so forth. There are 3 versions because there's the paper book, the traditional way, and then there's the Kindle ebook, and then there is the audio book, which I just finished recording. There's an experience. 5 days, 5 days sitting in a booth, just you and a big microphone, reading your book. And in the next room, there's an engineer, and about every 5 minutes he comes on and says, could you do that paragraph again?
One more time, right?
Yeah, that's it.
When you conceived of the book, I wonder if you had this experience. I'd heard about it. I experienced it myself. The moment where, so you have the idea around the book, and then the moment or the conversation maybe that, and I know I had with myself, it's that the conversation you have as you're trying to lay down at night. And of, do I have something worth sharing? Can I do it justice? And how do I thread a needle where I'm not, in essence, telling, but I'm also inviting in the audience? Were those some of the conversations that you had going on either with yourself or your what? Like, I'm very curious about that process because I think that is key. Tell me if I'm wrong in your experience, key to then how the book lays out. That's in essence, you're finding that voice, and now you can sort of get on the roller coaster of coming up with stories, or as you're writing, you think, oh, there's another story, and you hadn't planned for it, but the moment you're riding the wave of emotion and connection with the writing, talk about that notion of feeling like you had a story worth telling.
Well, I know that when I mentor and when I teach classes to young adult, I know that I can snazz it up. And some of the stories I can tell them are raving mad. They always thought the film industry was raving mad, but I have the examples. I mean, I'm the man who went around the set at 6 a.m. on the Pink Panther every morning and said to some grip, do you mind going to wardrobe and change your socks? Why would I do that? Well, because our star, Peter Sellers, he won't work if anyone's wearing the color green. The kids find that one just hilarious because it is raving mad. So I realized by trial and error what worked with my sort of test readership, who are the kids listening to me when I lecture and then I do the Q&A and so forth. And I've done that now for years. So by process of elimination, I worked out what are those 25 issues that really bothered them. How do I find love? What will be my career? Do I need a plan B? How do I find a mentor? Who will support me? How am I going to get money? All the basic stuff and also the ambition stuff. How far do I dare reach? Where is the glass ceiling? And I tell them, it's like you're in an envelope and it's dark, but you've got a pencil and you can poke at the edges, the limits of your envelope. And sure, once in a while, if you poke, the tip of your pencil will go through the envelope and you'll think, whoop, I am never going to be a concert pianist. I will never win at track. And I might even not be good at math. But you pull the pencil back and you find another direction and you poke. But if all you ever did was sit all on your lonesome in the middle of the envelope in the dark, well, then you'd never know what you could be. And you, I think, would end up dying with regrets for what you might have been but weren't because you didn't try it. It turns out that if you try something and it doesn't work, you can still feel good that you tried it. But if you don't keep trying, and the great glory of going to college and generally of your young years, and there are limits on it, and these are tough times and so forth. However, the great glory is that you have options, you have choices, you can experiment. And, you have to be very careful because you get that first job and your entry level, you can absolutely decide this is not for me, and you can change and go to a different job and try that. But at a certain point, you're no longer entry level because you're pretty good and they promoted you. It's very difficult sometimes to back up and go back to the fork in the road and take a different avenue for your career. So these early 2-3 years of your career, while you're pretty much entry level and you have options and choices and you can pivot, use that. Work out what is going to make you happy, because it's the old saying, if you enjoy what you do, you'll never work a day in your life. It becomes your vocation as much as it is a job that pay the rent.
I'm Rod Berger, and I have a confession. I used to think storytelling was just for writers and speakers. Boy, was I wrong. After interviewing over 4,000 people worldwide, from Fortune 500 CEOs to Hall of Fame athletes, and even a ragtag group of 9-year-old basketball dreamers, I realized something. We're all living stories every single day. The question is, are you the author of yours, or are you letting someone else hold the pen? In The Narrative Edge, I'll show you how to transform everyday moments into meaningful connections, how to turn that awkward networking conversation into genuine relationship, how to lead with authenticity instead of hiding behind bullet points and talking points. Look, life's messy. Your story doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be yours. And when you own your narrative, magic happens. You can get your copy today at drrodberger.com because the world needs your story, not someone else's version of it. And now, back to the episode.
Now, I know how much you embrace mentorship, but I'm wondering if those that were reading the book as you were writing it, if you got feedback that there was a sense of a dad voice, and I think it's very good for those. It comes across to me when I read it that you're talking about your life, you're sharing experiences that I can learn from, even at my age, and I'm not that younger generation, but there's a parental kind of feel to it. And I'm wondering, I wouldn't imagine that was intentional at all, but I also know how strong of a relationship you had with your late father, who passed a few years ago. And we talked before we started the interview about your choice to include the eulogy of your father. And I'm just wondering how much of your father's voice and sort of that paternal voice is a part of this book. And is that something that, I don't know, it feels like it's like when you find something that's you're not told is of value. It's not there. You don't know. It's an ingredient in some incredible dish that you're trying in a foreign country. And you say, well, wait a minute, there's a hint of something. That's the sense I get. And I don't know if that was intentional. My guess is it was not, but what is it like to hear someone give you that feedback? And have you received that feedback thus far through the process?
Yes, I absolutely have. Remember that by definition, foster kids either haven't got a dad, they may have never had a dad, their dad may have been an evil person, their dad may be in prison, they're living with strangers. I just had lunch with one of my mentees, and I said, "You're always so hungry. Why are you always so hungry?" He says, "Well, in the placement, I'm always hungry there." And I said, "Well, can't you just go to the fridge and get a snack?" He said, "No, because they have a padlock on it."
Yep.
He said, "Wait a minute, they padlock the fridge? Who have the keys?" And he said, "Well, the whole family that foster me." And I said, "And they have kids of their own?" "Yeah." And I said, "But they get keys, but you don't get a key?" He said, "Correct." So it's a cruel world. And I think a lot about fatherhood. I mean, I've raised four wonderful young adults of my own, I think one of the great set of privileges of anyone's life. I think to not have a father who's functional and encouraging, by studying that a bit, and especially by, dealing with foster kids who don't have that, what I think is a right of every human being. You ought to have a dad, someone who, and you used to have a mum as well, or at least one of them, someone who loves you. Unconditional love, I think, is which foster kids tend not to hardly ever.
That's right.
I think unconditional love is a necessary condition precedent. You've got to have that environment in order to blast through glass ceilings, to dare to do, to have ambition, to challenge yourself, but to feel that you're encouraged. If you haven't got unconditional love, then it's no good at all. In First Star, we work on that. A third of the curriculum is academic. A third is life skills, financial literacy and sex ed and so forth. But the other third, the third is you belong here. We care about you. We are the reliable grown-up. These kids sitting next to you in the classroom, they are your new brothers and sisters. They care about you too. And by the time we're finished with them 4 years later, when they graduate 12th grade, and by the way, in this most recent crop, every single one of our several hundred 12th graders in the United States has completed 12th grade. So
That's incredible.
Nobody dropped out. Nobody dropped out, and we're still hitting roughly 88, 89% onto college, with at least one offer and so forth. See, I wrote the book not just to kind of provide life, the kind you can get on TikTok. Repurpose your soda bottle. It's got some of that, but it's also, it does have the voice of the dad who cares and gives unconditional love and who hears you and sees you. And I've even done a thing which my publisher said, you're raving mad, it'll drive you crazy. I put my email address in the book.
I saw that.
And I said, let me know how you're doing. Now, don't know. I mean, I may have to hire a group of highly trained dads.
Well, see, that would be a great problem to have. Here's something, Peter, that I think is really interesting. And so in my previous work in mental health, I worked with a lot of kids in foster care. So I've heard the padlock story. I know what you're talking about. And I also have had the experiences, and I wrote about it in my book, where I'd be working with teenagers that were always sort of brought as the sort of bad kid into therapy. And you know what they would want to do so often? And this was by, I don't know if it was an accident, whatever. You'd get these kids with tattoos and discipline records, a mile thick. They would want to play little kid board games like Candyland with me. They just wanted to feel like a kid. And what I think is really powerful in the book, and I recommend this, see, this is what I think, and this is just me speaking, I think this is just as valuable for parents to read or for those that work with you. I mean, this is, yes, it's written for young adults in that regard, but there's so much here for multiple generations. The notion of what a foster kid goes through and the struggle of not feeling connected or wanted, sadly. A lot of those feelings I'm sensing in kids who do have nuclear families of where you think from the outside there is substance and structure. My 10-year-old daughter and I were watching last night. It just happened to be, not because you were British by birth, but there's a new Netflix documentary. I think it's Britain in the Blitz. And she loves history, and she was commenting that they talked about 400,000 kids were rushed out of London, right? Basically becoming automatic foster children to avoid the bombing from the Nazis. And
my mom, a month.
She was.
Yeah.
See, and to explain that to a 10-year-old, she couldn't comprehend that she and her brother would have been whisked away with a luggage tag.
Yeah.
With her information.
The house next door took a direct hit. from a German bomb, and everyone in the house next door killed. And my mother was, I want to say, was born in 28, so she was early teens, and she was evacuated to somewhere in the countryside with a strange family, and, they were very nice and so forth. But, her mum and dad were not evacuated. They were stuck in London. So that's really tough. I've written the book. I think you're exactly right. I think the buyership is different, is my guess, from the readership. I think the buyership is any adult who cares about a teenage or slightly older kid in their life. Are they graduating high school and they're looking around and don't have a job, or they're going to go to college and it's scary as heck, or they're graduating college and they're trying to navigate their way in a very strange workplace? I think it's for mums and dads to buy, or grandma and grandpa, or an Uncle Phil, and it's for teachers to buy. It's for mentors to buy. Frankly, anyone who cares about a young adult kid. I think it's also a fountainhead of conversation, because I think you can almost read it together with the person that you care about, or at very least every chapter at the end has points for reflection, which kind of summarize what was in that chapter. And those things are incredibly helpful, I am finding, to help a mentor to trigger discussions with their mentee that are good for both of them. That's the other thing about mentoring. Mentoring is brilliant for mentors. We know it's good for mentees, the kids.
You're exactly right.
It's also not just a privilege and an honor, but boy, it makes you feel good. There's
your spirit.
Finding happy is the ripples you put out on the pond. And there are many ways to do that, but one of them is go help someone younger than you. The log line of the book is what I know now that I wish I knew when I was 18.
Yeah.
And I look back, the things that I've done that I should never have done. I nearly died trying to rescue a kitten and, things like that. And so, young men especially are no good at risk assessment. You have a front on your brain and you have a back on your brain. And until you're 25, 26 years old, the amygdala at the back of your brain is making the decisions for you. It's fight or flight. There's a tiger. It's attacking me. Do I run or try and fight it? After you're 25 or 26 years old, the front of your brain, the prefrontal lobe, becomes dominant. And that is how you play the chess game of life. Well, wait a minute. There's somebody standing next to me. If I run, I won't have to run faster than the tiger. I only have to run faster than the other person, right? Or if I shout, they might come from the village with spears and help me fight off the tiger. It's the chess game of life, not just at one remove, but at 2 and 3 and 4 and 6 removes. But you don't have that part to your brain. Look, why is it young men who are sent off to go in the trenches and jump out with a bayonet and charge into the machine guns? One really good reason is because if it was middle-aged men, they wouldn't go, because they've got the front of their brain, and they would be saying, Sergeant, I think you should go, but, seriously, they have guns out there, and there's already dead people lying on the ground in front of us. Young people, they do the, military cheer, and they jump out of the trench, and they're proud of the uniform and so on and so forth. God bless, because, we have to defend our country. But the equation of war doesn't really work without young men and a few young women, because their thinking is not fully evolved to self-preservation. So, yeah, I put in the book as an example of what's a bad risk, that I sat in a hotel in what was functionally my office on the Pink Panther film, must have been on the 5th floor of the Mamunia Palace, a 150-year-old, originally a palace, now a hotel. And I did an all-nighter because I needed to catch up on the accounting. And I'm sitting there working away all on my own, and I hear meowing. And it sounds as though the meowing is coming from the bathroom. So I go in the bathroom, and meowing is coming from, I open these double doors in the wall, and it's not a window and it's not a cupboard, it's a pipe duct. And I look down, and 5 or 6 floors lower than me, I have a flashlight, and I'm looking, there's 2 little eyes, and there is a kitten. So I thought, well, not going down there, it's disgusting, and there's rats, and God knows. So I go back to my desk, and I'm working away, and it doesn't stop meowing. And in the end, in frustration, I thought, all right, damn it, I'm going to have to go save the kitten. So we're in the bathroom, I take off all my clothes, and I shimmy down the big pipe. And I get to the bottom, and when I get there, there's the cat. And before I can grab it, it takes one look at me, gets scared stiff, and runs away laterally, never to be seen or heard of again. I'm now at the bottom of a very narrow pipe duct, and I'm 5 floors down. So I thought, can't believe it. What a waste of time. And I start climbing up, and I got like 2 floors up, and I realized I haven't got the upper body strength to get myself back up to where I came from. So I went back down to the bottom, which was easy. And I sat there, I thought, what am I going to do? So I did a bit of shouting. Nobody came, very thick walls. And I thought, all right, I'm just going to have to do it very slowly without slipping back. And it took me over an hour, up 6 feet and down 2 feet, and up 4 feet and down a foot, and so forth. And I eventually fell out of the double doors into the bathroom, got myself in the shower, got clean, got my clothes on, went and sat at my desk. It was now dawn at 6 something in the morning, and there's a knock on the door, and it's one of the electricians, and he says, "Oh, I'm sorry to bother you so early. I'm so glad you're here. Could I go over my petty cash with you?" And I'm sitting there thinking, I just nearly died. They would never have found me. I could have died in
Where's Peter?
Yeah, where is he? Where is he? What's happened to him? He's been
We
kidnapped.
scared him off.
Well, I use that in the book as an example where if I'd really thought it through, I might have thought about, I will have to come back up every inch of what I'm going down. But that never occurred to me. So that would have been a risk that it would have been better not to take. But, my life is full of these sort of madcap, crazy things. Making a film is an extraordinary adventure. And
Well, it makes you relatable. That's what I think is the power of the anecdotes and these stories where you take people around the world. One, it's interesting. I think it pulls people in from a storytelling, and I think it humanizes you. That it's not a perfect Hollywood ending at the end of every chapter. You talk about, you give this wonderful example. I don't want to give it away. I'd rather you tell the story of Catalina, because here's something that I've thought about when I read the story about a young girl named Catalina for the book's purposes. That it's not just about sort of finding, in essence, my own voice, but it's also understanding the power of the collective voice.
Yeah.
And how applicable that is to today, when I do think that even though we might have fantastic technology, that loneliness element just seems to be getting bigger and bigger and bigger, regardless of the amount of resources a young person may or may not have. And I just love that the visual, as I was painting the picture in my mind of the story, it just brought great meaning. And I thought it was very, very applicable to not just my children, but kids that I know in the community and the work that I have done previously. If you don't mind sharing a bit of that story.
I'm happy to do it. It's one of the most emotional memories that I have in my nonprofit work. So interesting, it was also at UCLA. So we've got 60, we call them scholars, but they're high schoolers. And indeed, they're housed, educated, and encouraged on the university campus, even though they are only in high school. And we had a talent show. So we're sitting there in the Northwest Auditorium, in raked bank seats in the bleachers kind of thing. And one by one, the kids are coming down on the stage. I think they were 10th graders, and they're singing a song, or they are dancing, or they're doing a spoken word thing, or they're reading a poem they've written. And all is well until down comes Catalina. It's her turn. And she's this little itty bitty thing, and up comes the music. And there she is with her microphone, and she is so scared stiff, you can't get the first note out. And of course, now the playback music has left her behind and gone on without her. And now she's even more scared. And then the music stops, and she's like frozen like a deer in the headlights. And I'm thinking, oh, I can't believe we put her in this situation. What a mistake. Oh, this is so bad for her. And I can see out of my peripheral vision that Karina, who's the director of the academy, is getting up. She can go down and usher her off. And I thought, this is just terrible. And then something that we didn't do, either grown-ups did not solve it. Down onto the stage comes this young man who is in Catalina's cohort, and he's kind of the size of a linebacker. Occasionally you get a 14-year-old and they look like a grown man physically, and he lumbers down there and he plants himself with his back to the audience, and now we can't see Catalina, and there's a lot of whispering between them. And then two of the cohort girls go down, the young women, and now another 5, and now another 12, and now another 20. And then, I look, and we've got all 30 of the kids in that cohort are in a kind of scrum. And there's a lot of whispering, and then a hand goes up on the edge of the scrum, upward hand, turn on the music, the hand says. And up comes the music, and invisibly, but just about audibly, very faint out of the middle of the scrum, comes the voice of Catalina. And the more she sings, the stronger her voice gets. And she gets to the end of the song, and she sounds like Beyonce. I mean, it's just sort of amazing. And so the music ends. The audience, there must have been, 200, 250 adults sitting there. Audience went berserk. There were people crying. Everybody stood up. There was standing ovation and so forth. And the kids were sort of startled. They didn't really know, they're all thinking, what do we do now? And they came down, they put their arms around each other, and they came down as a kind of phalanx off the stage. I was so overcome by emotion that I had to go and have a walk. I'd come back later because I thought, this is the power of Birth Star. We have found we worked out how to make an environment where the natural way to help and be helped, the unconditional love instinct of the other kid came to bear. It came out. They delivered it. And they lifted up Catalina, and they came off the stage together. And that's what First Star does. And it is also the definition of what I think all of us, regardless of how old we are, we all need unconditional love. We all need someone who cares about us. We all need to be able to come home from school and tell the story, good, bad, or indifferent, that happened to you. We all need, when we're trying to work out whether we dare to try out for the team or the debate team or whatever it may be, everyone needs someone to say, well, of course you should do that. Absolutely you can do that. Don't you?
Subtle nudge.
Yeah, a subtle nudge. Absolutely. And in a good family, you get it from family. If you haven't got any family, well, that's why we have First Star.
Well, as we wrap our interview, Peter, and I could be chatting to you for days. There's so much in this book, and that's part of it. I don't want to give it away. I want to end with this one. you talk in the book, and this is a really key thing, I think, and I hope people, you check it out, you read it, is that you talk about kids that ask you, in essence, Mr. Samuelson, what's the right path to choose? And your basic retort to them is that they need to, before they can take a step, they need to pick a destination or a location on the horizon line. And while I enjoy the prose of that, right, the literary skill in writing that, what I really love about it is that it is empowering. It is not about, in essence, giving the child or the young person or the human the answer. And we live in a world where we think we just need the answer. And what you're doing is you're empowering, you're in essence, I think, encouraging with a subtle nudge to think about the stories that maybe they didn't think mattered, and they do. We want to thank Peter Samuelson. He is the author of Finding Happy, a user's guide to your life with lessons from mine. And we started this with your dedication and that you see others. I want you to know that we see you. You are a bright light in a very sort of cloudy world that we're in right now. And I think it's incredibly important for parents, those that care about their community, and young people that are looking to define and find value in the stories that make them who they are. Thank you for joining The Narrative Edge. I'm your host, Dr. Rod Berger, and check out our friends at PR by the Book. Big fans. Thank you again, Peter.
Thank you so much. Let's see if we can start a revolution and bring a bit of more empathy back into our world that is so polarized and full of hate and fear.
You've been listening to The Narrative Edge. You can get your copy of the book wherever books are sold. And remember that The Narrative Edge takes you around the world of storytelling, returning you to your story and the moments that define a life in motion. I want to thank my friends at Rick Productions and encourage you to check them out if you're looking to broadcast your ideas. Until next time, my friends, and remember that if you're not in control of your story, well, who is?